Hello and welcome to My Minefield with me, I'm David. In previous episodes, we've covered people's personal experiences of divorce and separation. Today, we're blessed we have a different perspective. We're joined by Claire, and Claire's a teacher, a head of year, and she's going to hopefully give a different perspective on some of the children who may be affected by divorce and separation go through at school. And due to the school that she works at, social media policy, you will only hear Claire's voice, and she will be out of vision. Hello and welcome, Claire.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. Just to give our viewers, listeners, some kind of context, can you talk a little bit about your journey into teaching, please?
Yes, so I've only really been teaching about 7 years. Before that, I did numerous jobs. But my main job was I was 12 years in subprime lending, so lending out money and collecting it back again. There was at one point had my own children. Once I'd had my own children, I decided that I needed to put some karma back in the world, and so I wanted to do something for other people. So I thought, what can I do? I'm going to be a teacher. So I didn't have any qualifications other than my basic GCSEs. So I went on to the Open University, did an English degree through them, and then became a teacher where I am now. So.
Very good. Have you managed to find any transitional skills? Because I should imagine the world of debt collecting and maybe dealing with people face to face can bring some challenges, but that similarly that could be linked to the classroom in some degree.
Massively, actually. De-escalation is one of the things that is that a lot of teachers find tricky, especially in a pastoral role, due to the fact that obviously you get angry students, angry parents, and the de-escalation techniques, but also the immediate need to bond with people, to be able to speak to people and form that relationship. And relationship building is imperative in schools. It's the one thing that makes our job so much easier, is building relationships with everybody, other teachers, parents, students. And you have to do that if you're in finance, to be a good collector. People pay people that they like generally, and you have to find that trigger as to what it is that how those people what they respond to. And so in order to be able to do that, the learning that I had from actually doing the debt collection was the fact that I'm now very good with people
and communication skills at different levels as well. Yeah.
So there is a definite crossover between them, even though that socially they're vast, but but
I suppose again, within the classroom, you're effectively, that's vast too. You got kids, parents from all different walks and backgrounds, so it's quite a good transferable
skill. Yeah.
So you said you wanted to give something back. Would you say that you love your job and think you've managed to achieve giving something back?
I do love my job. It is very tough at times, because you've got two elements to my job. Being a teacher and a head of year, they're completely different. So obviously the teaching element is having to reach these children. Some of them are really disengaged. Some of them have additional needs. Some of them are really, really bright. So it's about being able to look at a class of 30 children and being able to try and reach every single one of them. So that is in itself obviously is quite difficult. The head of year role, again, is different. Again, I've got 250 children under my care, essentially. And again, each of those needs is different depending on their upbringing, issues that they've had, pressures from home. It could be that parents have really pressurised them into trying to do really well in their exams. It could be that the parents don't care. So, and everything in between. So it is two very different parts of my job, obviously, that you have to do together. So it's can be very draining.
I think it's very obviously you're, I suppose, not spread thin effectively because you have those two roles. But I was going to say, from your perspective, have you witnessed any behavioural changes in certain students that maybe have had parents that are going through separation or divorce, and if you could just give us an insight into what those behavioural changes might be, if you're aware of any.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see it right from the beginning, where if a student comes in and they're very teary or upset, and girls and boys do present differently generally. Girls will come in and they're quite teary, and they'll come into our office and they'll sort of say what's happened, and like right at the beginning of the process, and it's them trying to understand what's going on and what's happening. Boys, we generally get an email from the parent, usually the mum, that tells us there's something going on, and we have to go find them. We will go and seek them out. Everything okay? Yes, fine. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then just essentially keep checking in with them to make sure that they're okay and that they know that we're there to support them if they need to. The behaviour generally will depend on how amicable the split is.
Really?
Sometimes you can see that the children are really struggling because they love both their parents, and one parent may be finding it more difficult than the other. One parent may be slating the other, which obviously children will find really hard because they don't want to hear their parents, slagging off their other parent.
They probably get enough of that at school.
Yeah, exactly.
And stuff.
And so they really struggle with that because they don't want to be seen to be taking sides. And some parents do really push that. So it really does depend a lot on how amicable and how strong the child is as well. Some fly through and it's not even an issue. But some do really struggle. And
subsequently, have you seen it affect the child's performance as well as maybe even friend groups? Because I know that's a big thing as well.
Yeah, well, some refuse to go into lesson, like they're too upset so they just don't go into lesson. They start making excuses not to come into school. So there's obviously a knock-on effect with regard to their education. Their focus in class because they're worrying about things at home. They might be staying up late because, one parent's letting them get away with murder. And so they'll be staying up late on the Xbox or whatever, and then they're coming in school tired. And there's a lot, a wide range of things that you see. As I say, some children just breeze through it and it's not a problem. Others really do struggle depending on, what their resilience is like.
I suppose their resilience, but also what the other dependence or relationship is with the parent as well, and how much that prizing away effectively. Yeah, and
how the parents are dealing with it. Obviously, if one parent is really, really struggling, that's going to have a knock-on effect with the child. There's a massive increase in anxiety sometimes with regard to they're worrying about adult things that they shouldn't need to be worrying about.
Yeah.
Or additional.
They're being drawn into that almost growing up before they get there.
Exactly. Additional pressures of new money worries, for example, or not now being able to have the most expensive trainers where they could before, or, and that's that sort of thing. So it comes across in many different ways, but as I say, you do see them playing up in lessons.
Is that more of a tension thing, do you think?
Yeah, it could be. Sometimes it could be that they are grasping for any attention, especially if they don't see the other parent very often. Obviously, that it could be an issue. And then if, one of the parents has to work longer or, so it really does depend. But you do see a wide range of different behaviour. It could be poor behaviour choices. It could be anxiety, lack of focus, not sleeping, all of that stuff. Friends falling out. If they're tired, they don't have as much tolerance for things.
Yeah, I guess also as well, depending on the friend group as well, it can be even target. Once it's common knowledge that the parents, maybe are separating, that they can, the bullying thing, which is obviously quite evident in most schools already, can then be another target to maybe some people do. I don't know. Obviously, you see it. Maybe some of them will suppress it more and keep their feelings inside, or even not voice stuff because they don't want to put a target on their back for more attention of a negative.
Yeah, I think it depends on the demographic of the school, to be honest. If you've got a wide range of children from lots of different demographics, then divorce is not going to be that much of an issue. Like single parents are commonplace, so it wouldn't necessarily be an issue in that respect. It would be more of, can they keep up with what their friends are doing? Like, I can't afford to go to the pictures anymore.
Yeah.
I can't go to McDonald's with you because I've got to help look after my little sister, or I have to go and pick up my little brother from school, so I can't go to the park. And that'll be the sorts of changes that you might see in young people when going from a two-parent family to a one-parent family.
Yeah. And on that, obviously, whilst we're talking about the education side of it, from your perspective, is there additional support for these students who find themselves who come across, in that situation, find themselves in that situation?
So the school I'm currently in is very inclusive. Like, we really try hard to support our students in every way we can. So in our school, we offer internal pastoral support. We offer external pastoral support that we have to pay for as a school, so we can offer children, like, you can speak to us anytime you like, break, lunch, after school, not during lesson. We're quite clear on that. Yeah. Or we can get someone in weekly to see you that's not related to the school, so they don't.
So like external counsellor.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So that, because some kids don't like speaking to people where they feel there's a connection to their parent, so they might not always trust that we're going to go back to their mum or back to their dad and go, oh, they've told us about this, and so some do worry about that. But it really depends on the school, to be honest. Every school has a budget, and what they spend their budget on is up to them.
For sure, but obviously you just said about you have to pay for these external counsellors, and that's not is that part of the overall school budget, or there's not an additional? Because obviously I know it's been a massive thing recently, like mental health with the government, and it's become more and more of an issue. There isn't like a pot of money for. There's not. No,
the school gets a budget, and then what they spend it on is up to them.
So it could be minibuses, it could be mental health, it could be different.
The electric bill.
Right,
when all the electric went up, the school had to obviously pay for that. We didn't get any more money for it, and so they had to take things from other areas to just pay for the electric.
Whilst everyone at home was getting their £500, the schools were getting actually nothing.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
right. Okay.
And so we had to find that money from somewhere. Like, so the cost of living that is for happening to each of us individually also happens to schools, but there is not a particular increase in budget. So we're pushed as a school to increase the number of pupils that we have, so that we can obviously get more money.
But so is that how the funding effectively works? It depends on literally per pupil. But then surely, obviously, again, you then have. I get it per pupil, but then you're going down the lines of having, if you've got per pupil, you've got probably more problems. You've got more need for maybe mental health assistances and all the rest of it. So it's kind of like a self-feeding, spiralling out of control kind of system to a degree. It must be difficult.
It is, and also in our school, we've found we're a victim of our own success. People in our community know that we are very inclusive. We're really good with additional needs. We're really good with those kids that need support. So then they send them all to us.
Right. So
and
big catchment.
Yeah. And so obviously we get more of that because as I say, we're pretty good. We've got special units for different things to help the kids out specifically. So the more, they can't get in. They have to get into the school like anyone else, but we would be their first preference.
Right. I suppose, but you're going to get to a point, surely, where it tops out. And the thing is, obviously, class size, and like you said earlier on in the conversation, you were saying about, for argument's sake, that you've got classes of 30, trying to engage with those it's almost like you're trying to pour more students in, because, and obviously you've got more parents that want to be part of the inclusive, but in actual fact, it's obviously a struggle already to engage with those 30. So if you get to 32, 33, 34, then, which brings me very nicely on to my next question, which is like, with all the responses and the things we've spoken about, does it ever get too much for you? And if it does, what do you try and do to reset, or do you draw on your debt collecting past or whatever it might be to have a reset and go and step away from it?
Yeah, we help each other, like heads of year, pastoral, we kind of help each other. You might find there's probably quite a lot of dark humour that goes on behind closed doors and WhatsApp groups and stuff, because if you don't laugh, you cry, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Some weeks tend to be better than others. So like you'll get a few weeks of where it's just non-stop, I've had children threaten to punch my teeth down my throat. Wow. I've had students that call me a fat bitch on a regular, and that happens. But you need to understand that actually this behaviour is just communication. It's not personal. It's not personal.
It's like a lashing out.
And so it's so trying to remember that.
But that must be sorry to interject, but there must be quite a skill, talent to, because some people say, just having said that scenario happened at a football match, then it would normally result in punches and aggression. To be able to take a breath, and I suppose obviously you can't, I'm not obviously not saying you're going to turn around and lamp them one, but at the same time is that it must take quite a good skill to go and recognise that it is a reaction and it's not actually personally at you, it's more what's going on in their lives, or that they're struggling with to understand something or whatever it might be. So that must be quite a skill set to get hold of and do that.
Yeah, you do have to manage it, and I've got people around me that remind me that I'm doing more good than bad, because sometimes you feel really guilty and overwhelmed that you can't help everybody. You're like, if a child gets permanently excluded in your year group, and you catch yourself thinking, what could I have done differently? How could I have saved them? And at the end of the day, they're only with you for 6 hours a day or whatever. And you're not going to be able to stop all the influences they have outside of school. And so all you can do is your best whilst you're in school. But it can be very overwhelming. But what makes it a good head of year, I believe, is that actually you are emotionally attached to these children. I have 250 kids, plus my 2 at home, And so it is just trying to do the best for them.
Yes, it's very admirable. Obviously, you come across as quite empathetic, and I suppose to do that role of the head of year, you have to be. But it's also having the understanding that you do have to sometimes step away, and you can't save everyone. And I said, from my experience being a parent, to two kids is a lot. To be almost like a parent for 6 hours for 250, and then a parent for 24 hours for the other 2 is a lot to take on. And I think it's underestimated. I think I really do believe that those emotions that you must have to try and I suppose what in a way I'm trying to say is I really admire that you can have that to go in, want to make a difference, try and make a difference, and then also at times go, I've done everything I can, and that's.
Yeah, I do have to be reminded of it sometimes, to be honest. I'd spend a lot of time at home doing paint by numbers and turning off, listening to real crime things or
escapism,
old episodes of Star Trek, because I'm an absolute nerd. But yeah, so and it is trying to just switch off sometimes. I do struggle to do that, but as I say, it's just trying to do their children at the end of the day. And it is trying to remember that. And sometimes you do forget and you do get angry, and you've spent weeks and weeks and weeks trying to help a child, and then they come and swear at you, and you're like, you need to walk away from me now because I'm really angry, and what you've done is not okay. And so sometimes you do have to say that to the children at school. But again, as I said to you earlier, it is wholly about building those relationships, those trustful relationships. And, we had an incident at school only a few weeks ago where there was an issue between 2 sets of boys, and they are year 10, so they're 15 years old. And you would expect them to be fisticuffs trying to sort it out between themselves. The first group of boys came straight to my office. They were like, they've done this. And then followed very closely by the second group of boys who were like, oh, they're going to be saying this, that and the other about us. I'm like, well, they've all come to school, mum, haven't they? Essentially, like, they've all come to me. So instead of them going off and arguing and fighting between themselves, they've done the right thing.
It's done the more diplomatic.
Yeah, they've come to me, and I'm like, right, let's sort this out. Like, this doesn't need to be a big thing.
Or escalate.
Exactly. And so what I'm hoping is over the years, because I've been their head of year since year 7.
But you've installed that in them, effectively.
Yeah, and, and sort of said, yes, we can be angry, but let's just watch what we do with that anger and, model that behaviour. So, like, I've been angry at those children. And I'm like, I am very angry with you right now. So I'm going to walk away, and we can speak about this a bit later on once I've calmed down. And some people might think that's unprofessional, but actually that's modelling behaviour that they need to be doing themselves. And so that's what I believe is building those relationships, modelling the behaviour that they need to be able to see that really they should be seeing outside in society and parents and relatives.
But I think it's great, and obviously the more you're explaining about the circumstances and the situations you have, and this is where I think some parents take it for granted. From what you're saying, from your experiences, and I can see how passionate you are about it, you're more than a teacher, a lot more than a teacher, effectively, and you realise that, and I don't mean it's any patronising kind of condescending like way, but you can see that you really, really care, and that you want to installing some of those things, like even when they come to you and talk to you about it, is much better than like a punch up or anything worse and all the rest of it. So that must be very, very rewarding.
It is,
yeah, it must be. Yeah.
It is really rewarding, and as I say, I feel my karma bucket is.
You're filling it up.
Yeah, my karma bucket.
From the deck cleaning,
yeah,
you're
exactly.
definitely getting there.
Yeah,
That's good. That's good.
My karma bucket is definitely
and
filling
up. And it must be also if you do alleviate some of these issues or circumstances, it must be very rewarding to see that, and even see them like grow as like and actually like process stuff, and rather than just lashing out to process. It must be very rewarding to see that as well in certain individuals that maybe originally their go-to response was lashing out to then actually processing it, discussing it, and doing it in a much more mature kind of manner. Must be.
Yeah, and the gratefulness for the parents as well. So obviously, some of the parents struggle, and then once their child has calmed down, they're like, "Oh, thank you so much for your support. Thanks for your help and stuff." You're like, "No, it's absolutely fine. That's kind of what my job is." But again, it is literally just time, effort, and money. That's all kind of what it comes down to.
And consistency. It must be consistency.
Yeah.
Obviously, you said like time, effort, and money. Is it just something I want to touch on? Is there any guidance from the education authorities how teachers or schools should manage or address students from different family types?
Not that I've seen.
No.
Not that I've seen, to be honest. Like, everything that I've learned about being a head of year is essentially trial and error of what I've learned myself. We don't get, as again, different schools might be different, but I never got any specific training to be a head of year. I read a book because that's my go-to.
Right.
I read a book about someone had written about it. Took tips from the more experienced heads of year and made it my own. We're all different. We're all completely different in our styles in the school that I work at. But from the government, from the educational authority, no, I've not seen anything.
No. So, okay. There's no.
I've not seen anything. I'm not saying there isn't any. I've not seen any.
But it just seems that in the world of guidance, and obviously, the reason why I raise it is that maybe it's for sound bites, especially in the current political climate. There seems to be lots of people. There's advice for this or guidance for that, and
you've got the safeguarding. You've got safeguarding all of the policies with regard to that side of things, but actual guidance or training to do the job that we do, no. Right.
Just whilst we're on there, like the topic of schools trying to deal with parents, I would like, if I can, share one of my experiences. So. And this could be down to the individual school, but I had a situation where shortly after my separation, there was a school trip. I was supposed to pay by the app. I hate the app things. Didn't work. Went to the school to discover that I'd been removed from second contact to third, and my replacement had been installed as second contact, and that subsequently there was a school trip that they'd had a meeting and half of it had been given away free, but I was never disclosed. Now, obviously, that's just my experience that I had. But with what it seems like more and more separated, split families, is it really hard to accommodate both parents? Because obviously, from what you've been saying, it's a very full-on, all-encompassing job. So, is it doable to accommodate both parents? And I suppose the second part of that question would be, are both parents even interested?
Right, there's a few questions in there. So, yes, it's very difficult because it really depends on the personalities of the parents, how interested they are. Are they, and their reasons for their interest, are they just interested because they have to be or feel like they should be, or are they genuinely interested? And do the students want them to be interested? So I had an incident not so long ago where one of my the parents split up quite some time ago, and she was living with one parent but didn't want her other parent to know anything about her school information, like behaviour, how she was doing, grades, nothing. Because she was over the age of 18, she wrote a letter saying that it's her data, and due to Data Protection Act, that she didn't want her mother, in this case, to have anything to do with the school. We checked with the solicitors, and legally she was entitled to that. So we were not allowed to contact the mum for any information, to give her any information. So now, over the course of a couple of months, I'm drip feeding the child, saying, your mum just really cares about you. She really wants you to, she just needs to know when something good happened. I'm like, will you let me ring your mum and just tell her this? Will you let me ring your mum and just tell her that? And in the end, she agreed to lift it. And obviously now we can speak to both parents again. But that's her way of controlling the situation. Like, she needed to assert some control in her life, and she somehow found out that she could do that through her own data protection.
Wow.
And so, yes, it is quite tricky. Some parents demand to know everything about everything. Some will ring up and say, well, I want me to be number one because the child lives with me, and I want my step partner to be, or the partner to be number two. And then that will be down to me to have that conversation and say, well, really, dad should be number two, and then any step should. But there's no legally binding thing around it. So it is just, again, about the relationships you have with the parents. So as a father, you have legal responsibility, parental responsibility. The school has to tell you. If you ring up and say, I want a conversation with you every time you have a conversation with mum, then legally they should be doing that.
Right.
Obviously, it's a lot of work.
Which I get.
But legally, they should be doing that.
Yeah. Oh, that didn't happen in this case.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you might have to put your foot down, and there'd be a note on the system, call dad when you call mum, sort of thing, so that we know.
Yeah.
Because we don't always know.
Yeah, for sure. And
so
until it's flagged.
So we don't always know that parents are split up, or they might, some parents are happy to communicate with each other. So we'll tell mum, and then mum tells dad. Sometimes I call dad on purpose because dad's the strict one, and I know that if I tell dad,
happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so again, it's that knowing your parents, knowing your families.
Again, it comes back to, obviously, again, just with my set of circumstances, it's effectively, unfortunately, the communication isn't great. It's actually non-existent. And I guess you may have that as well, where ex-partners actually don't have any communication whatsoever.
Yes.
So therefore, again, and this is something I've been really aware of in my situation. And I get that you're trying to do your job. You're busy. You're trying to educate in the actual subject, and you're dealing with all these other issues. But at the same time, I desperately wanted to be involved in my children's education. I wanted them to know that I'm there for them, and it's just a case of, I suppose, effectively wanting to, which wanted to be like present and be part of it. And I think I found it really difficult to accept that. And again, maybe I took it personally, that the school had taken this decision without any communication with me to remove me from second to third, and to have a chat about a trip that I was contributing half towards, that they've already negotiated, to give her half free without consulting that with me. But it's something I had to accept. I had to accept an awful lot along the way. But I also get, and I'm not unreasonable. I didn't want special treatment. I get the pressures that you're under. I get the pressures that the school was under, and I'm not unrealistic. I just think we all could do with, which it seems like something you're doing with your students, is communicate a little bit better. Yeah. I mean, and again, it kind of brings me on to my next question. It's like, I get a kind of sense as well that due to other external pressures in parents' lives, some parents now see school to be much more than school. Effectively like police officers, child psychologists, GPs, UN peacekeepers. Do you and your colleagues, in the staff room, ever discuss this, that it's like you're all things to all people?
All the time, yeah.
All the time.
All the time.
Right.
Yeah. It's increasing as well, and you see it a lot on social media. Teachers are responsible for, apparently we're responsible for sending fines out when for holidays. Right. Yeah, we get the blame for that.
Right.
And obviously we were striking in the last year. So you see a lot of, they can strike, then, but they are sending out fines. Like, I'm not sending out a fine to anybody. Like, it makes I come to work and I teach your child. I try and make your child a nicely rounded human being that we can then send out into society without, breaking the law, essentially. But it is more than that now. When you look at social media, we are responsible for mental health. Having a child with additional needs myself, the school is responsible for that too. The school is responsible for educating our children. The school is responsible for one-to-ones if they're slightly behind. If they've missed a lot of school, how are we going to catch them up? And so the school is generally, in parents' eyes, responsible for most things nowadays. And again, there is very little free support for parents. And so where else are they going to go? It's far easier to pick up the phone to the school and say, this is happening, what are you going to do about it, than to get a GP appointment or to try and speak to CAMS, for example, or. But
again, not any specific cases, but there's also an argument that we all need, as parents, need to take a bit of personal responsibility as well, and maybe. And again, this is what I said about the external pressures. Is I also get that parents are, now tucked up with massive mortgage repayments. Now they're tucked up with energy costs. They're trying to earn more money. You normally got both parents working now. The pressures. Yeah, and then to come home to deal with a kid that maybe have a detention or maybe have this ruck or that ruck or whatever it might be. As you said, we're kind of programmed to take the path of least resistance. So we get on the phone or we email school and go, oh, I think this is wrong. Can you help out with this, or can you organise this, and this? Because it relieves some of that pressure that parents kind of think. I'm not saying it's right, but I just think that, from my experience, we're actually compromising, which it should, to a degree, it should be. I know it always comes with aggro, but there should be some pleasurable parts of being a parent.
Yes.
And there should be some responsibilities of being a parent. And I think that more and more focus is coming on that I want to do the good things like the days out of thought part, but the aggro and the grief I don't really want to deal with, so the teachers can.
Yeah, I get that. But there's also, you've got mum guilt, dad guilt is a real thing. So, I've got 2 children. I work 11-hour days most days when I'm in school. Yeah. And one of my daughters is autistic. And so I get massive mum guilt because I'm like, well, I'm working my butt off, mostly 11-hour days. I'm in school at 7 and I don't leave till 6, and they chuck me out at 6 o'clock. The school closes and they lock up. So right. I can't stay any longer. And then I'm like, well, actually my own children could probably do with some support from me. Yeah. But if I'm doing that, then other parents are also doing that. So when their children are coming home and going, this happened today, and you never guess what, Joe hit me for no reason, and then the parents are like, I'm not having that, and then they call up and they go, well, Joe hit so-and-so for no reason. I'm like, well, let's see what really happens, because the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. And so you get, obviously parents are working hard, and they don't always focus on the children because they have to pay their mortgages and their rent and do. Some of my parents have 2-3 jobs to make ends meet because they're not academic themselves.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it is a struggle for them to appreciate, obviously, what's happened at school. And so there is deflection, obviously, from parents. Most of our parents are amazing.
Yeah.
The vast majority of our students are amazing. I can have really good constructive conversations with them. And some of the parents I speak to where children are struggling in school are begging for help. Like, what can I do? And at the end of the day, the support outside of school is, the waiting lists are massive. And so there isn't really much available straight away if you want to pay for it, unless you want to pay for it.
Yeah, but even then, it's like that can spiral into extreme costs rapidly.
Yes.
And you're still into the realms of availability as well,
Exactly.
because it seems as though you've got an awful lot of people trying to access it, and it just doesn't seem to be enough supply.
Yeah, exactly. And so where people need instant support, obviously, then that always falls to the school, because at the end of the day, we are targeted on grades, essentially. Are we hitting this child's target? And in order to do that, we need to make sure that we are meeting their pastoral needs, because an unhappy child generally is not going to hit their target. And so we need to it's not as simple as
balance almost.
Yeah, so it's not as simple as we teach them and they all learn. You've got students coming into class that are not living with their parents. They don't have clean uniform. They haven't had breakfast or probably even lunch. The last meal that they had might have been their free school meal the day before.
Wow.
We have to wash uniforms for children. Now, they are not the majority, but those minority students that are really struggling, that have parents in and out of jail or whatever, don't live with their parents, or watch, violence at home. Different cultures have obviously different expectations and different varying levels of discipline, shall we say. And then they're obviously having to come into school and deal with all the social stuff at school and social media. There is no switching off from it.
No.
And so all the increasing needs that are happening in school, we deal with the most challenging students most of the time, which is a shame, because obviously we've got some really beautiful children which we don't generally or often spend a lot of time with. We spend a lot of our time with the most challenging.
Yeah. But it's a shame. But also, they didn't decide to be in those situations, did they? And it's just, I suppose it's like the $1 million question: is how do you solve loads of those kids' plight? And I have, it's not being the professor of doom, but I have a fear that those ones that are challenging, numbers are going to grow going forward because of the way, like literally everything we've just said, with parents trying to do more and more. The pressures that I think more and more relationships are going to break down going forward because of the pressures, external pressures.
Yeah.
And go on, sorry.
And also you need to understand that some of these parents have needs themselves. So, a specific one of my students really struggles at school with making behaviour choices. I don't like calling home all the time because I know that his mum suffers with mental health issues, and they don't need me calling up every 5 minutes saying, oh, they've done this or they've done that.
Yeah.
And so you have to be really mindful of that too.
Wow.
And you've got adults with additional needs having children with additional needs, and so they can't always parent. Yeah. And so it's not just as simple as they're a bad parent. They might have very good intentions but are unable to cope themselves right now. But you also do have parents that are just poor and resistant to change. It's hard being a parent, as you know. Like, it's really hard parenting, and it takes a lot of time, and it's time consuming and draining, and some people just don't want to do that. But they are the minority. Like, the vast majority of our parents are very good.
I think it is hard. I think it is really hard parenting, but I think there's no handbook. I think the thing is, well, most of us learn from our experience of our parents.
Yes.
We get a snapshot of our friends when we're kids, and we all normally pick the good bits. Oh, but such and such's dad did this, and he took him there and did this. But we only have our parents as a point of reference, and unfortunately enough, I think that's when it becomes cyclical, effectively. Because if you are unfortunate that you didn't have a great experience, or from parents, or even then, like parents working away or whatever it might be, the pattern is then often repeated through generation. So again, some of these kids, through no fault of their own, are kind of like behind the 8 ball before they've even got anywhere near school.
And
that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you find the disparity the biggest. So our pupil premium students will perform lower than our non-pupil premium students, for example. So our disadvantaged we push, no matter what we do, we will push our pupil premium. Like we have a saying, it's pupil, PP first. And so we try and support those students first to try and reduce that disparity. But no matter what we've done so far, it hasn't worked. The pupil premium students, which are our most disadvantaged, are more likely to, be further from their targets than other students in the school. Yeah. And schools aren't perfect. The setup isn't perfect, but until the system changes, I don't think anything else will change. You will always get parents that are not interested. You'll get parents that blame the school, blame the teachers for fines,
Yeah. It's very easy to point at, look what's going on over there, rather than take some personal responsibility, isn't it? And I think, like you said, maybe I'm wrong, but from an outsider looking into it a bit, it seems like lots of the stuff, and I think it's more a government general thing, or like you said about the system, it's sticky plasters over gaping wounds. It's like, patch it up, let's go again, patch it up, let's go again kind of thing. And obviously, from what you've been saying as well, you seem really passionate about it, you seem to care about it. But I think I even question that has a finite length with it, in that after year 20, 30, that's probably going to start to wear thin.
I do see that a lot, which is why teachers are leaving the profession in their droves, because they're exhausted and burnt out. But also the challenges in school depends on where the school is. My school is in a very mixed demographic area. I've got friends that work in private schools. They don't have behaviour issues, but their mental health issues that they have in those private schools, with the pressures of them not getting a level 9 or whatever. Or their parents not being around because they're high flyers, and
the boardings and all the rest of it.
Exactly. That they have different challenges altogether, and so it really does depend, but on where the school is and the demographic of the students and the culture of the school. Like, as I said already, I'm really proud to work at my school. It's very inclusive, and I support the head teacher 100% with what they believe in. Different schools are completely different.
I suppose it's like the jar of sweets, isn't it? You pull one out. Depending on where you are, you can get a different experience. If you had a magic wand, do you see any feasible way that parents can actually return to being parents? And effectively, what I'm trying to say is, if you go back 30 odd years when you had one parent at home fundamentally the whole time, and I think there was more discipline, there was more structure to the family unit. Do you think that would make if you could wave that magic wand and that was your wish, would that make your job easier? Or
I think so. I do think having a parent that is there for the needs of the child when they get home from school, helping with homework, making sure that they're doing, a bit of housework or whatever, a few chores. Really helps. Talking through their day, like the children, the biggest thing I see at the minute is the resilience. There is, and it massively crashed in COVID, but even before that, the resilience of children now is what I get worried about. Like, I'm concerned about the resilience that they will go into this big wide world and they leave school and they're going to be like, wide-eyed and scared, because it's completely different to what they see in school now. And obviously, parents, not all parents, I don't want to just obviously, say all parents, but a lot of parents will not take responsibility for their child's actions. And so we get a lot of, he can't sit still in lessons, I think he's got ADHD, or I think this, my child might be autistic, and that's why they're doing what they're doing.
Also excusing it?
Yes. And so even I have a child with additional needs, and I don't excuse the behaviour. And so you need to balance it with, you don't want to traumatise your child with additional needs. They have to have some sort of support at school, they do, because otherwise it leads to real bad mental health problems, self-harm, things like that. So I'm not saying that's not the case, but excusing it rather than working with it, I think, is a problem, and then that doesn't build the resilience that they need, and also the life skills that they need to be able to do life, jobs and things like that.
Communications, relationships, the whole thing.
Exactly. And so I think it is really difficult. Like, the children need to know that if they don't get a level 5, the world's not going to collapse. They need to know that their life will go on if they have to go into a class with someone they've fallen out with. Like, we have children now that refuse to go into lesson because they've got to sit next to, an ex-boyfriend or a friend that they've fallen out with. And they're like, I can't go into that lesson because that person's in there. And we
just can't deal with these issues.
And that happens all the time, like daily, that sort of thing. And so that is something that takes up a lot of time, because you don't want these children to feel like they're not being heard. But that we could then be doing more productive things.
Yeah, it's a very fine balancing act between invalidating their feelings and also being productive in the day, because I imagine that can be really, really time consuming. Before you know it, you've spent 25, 30 minutes navigating an issue like you've just explained.
Yeah, and then you have to run off to teach.
Yes.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff, non-contact stuff gets done after 3:00, hence me having to stay till 6.
Wow, yeah.
Doing reports, filling out paperwork, calling parents.
You did touch on it just a minute ago. Do you think that, obviously you said it was poor before, but do you think the COVID and the homeschooling and kids being isolated really compounded and made that problem worse?
100%. If you look at the attendance to schools before COVID and after, we've never been able to get back up to the attendance that we had before COVID.
Really?
Yeah. So before COVID, average attendance was like 95%, maybe 96, depending on the year group. I was able to sustain that as a head of year. But now we're lucky if the national average is 91%.
So it drops, yeah.
And it's dropped. And there is a direct correlation to children attending school and the levels that they get in their GCSEs. That's been proven. And so, so the resilience of children, but also I think the resilience of parents of being able to get their child to go into school and have that conversation. And obviously some conversations will turn to arguments when it comes to parents and children. Like, we've all done it. We've all argued with our kids.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes like the parents have so much on their plate that they just can't be bothered to have that argument with their child. And then they'll go, well, they've got anxiety and so they're not coming in. Yeah. So, and then, and then we get emails saying, can you send work home for my child because they're anxious, they can't come into school. And then they get upset when we say, no, they need to come in. If they come into school and they don't go to lesson, it's up to us to then teach them in a different way. We can then support them in school, even if they don't go to their lesson. But if they stay at home, then we can't reach them at all.
But it's the social skills, and it's the social interaction as well, isn't it? And, But then again, I suppose it's playing devil's advocate from the kids or the parents' point of view. Is when you've seen so much movement towards tech and the soon coming AI and all the rest of it. And also that the school and the education system managed to teach everyone from homeschooling and Zoom lessons and all the rest of it. They're probably like, because they don't want the aggro with the argument with the kid, they go, oh yeah, you can, we're getting to send the work. But obviously it's the actual social skills, it's that interaction, because it's not, as you've already touched on, you're not just dealing with the actual syllabus, you're dealing with confrontation, you're dealing with someone's likes, someone's needs, an argument, whatever it is. And that's, I think that's where people, where some parents maybe lose sight of what school's actually about. It's not just the actual syllabus. It's more about some of those interactions that you have to navigate through as well.
And also the lessons that we teach, we can't send those to a student and go teach yourself, because the lessons that we teach obviously are based on our input at the front of the class and going round and verbal feedback. And so it'd literally be essentially us saying, you need to do a lesson plan for John and a lesson plan for everybody else, because it's not the same.
No.
And so also encourages children not to come in. If they've got work to do, they feel like, oh, I'm doing my schoolwork, it's fine. And most of the lessons online were still, interactive.
Yeah.
And so, but they wouldn't have that either. And so it is, we don't encourage at all children sitting at home and then parents asking us for work. We're like, no, they need to come into school, even if they're not in their lesson.
But it seems as well, with parents, and it seems much in the wider world, we seem to be losing the art of constructive conversation, and everyone's petrified of any kind of conflict. Conflict doesn't have to be fisticuffs. It can be, we can sit here and have a discussion. I might fundamentally disagree with your point of view, but we can still go, I really enjoy that conversation. Thanks. I see your point. I can appreciate it. And let's try and find a mutual place where we can join up. It seems as though, like you said, and I've seen it, even with my kids, I'm not doing that. And then you get, the bottom lip comes out, everything gets thrown around the room. And I've done it. I've done it 100%. You panned, and then 5 minutes you let them off, rather than actually sticking to the hard line and going, no, we're going to see this through. I have done that on occasions, but I get it again. It's like, it's the path of least resistance that we often take.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same with parents as well.
Yeah.
managing the parents' expectation is really quite tricky.
That's the trick of life, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Managing people's expectations.
It is, yeah. And that, I think, as well, as I say, when I was talking about my life skills, the person that sits in my office with me, she always says, I love it when you get an angry parent on the phone. She said, and she just literally puts everything down and sits and listens to me, because by the end they're thanking me and because the parents' mindset's completely changed. But we're not trained on that. Like, there is no handbook for how to deal with parents. And I think, as I say, there is pretty much two. If career-wise, you've got the head of department that deals with all the proactive stuff with lesson planning and spreadsheets and things, and they are planning for their department. And then you've got the pastoral side generally, which is head of year, which is more reactive. Like, you're reacting to things that have happened. You try and be as proactive as you can and put things into place, but you're essentially reacting to the things that are happening around you. You never know what is going to happen in your day. So you might have a 5-period day where you're teaching all 5 lessons and still having to deal with,
other issues.
Freddie and Johnny just had a punch up in the car park, or, one of your kids told a teacher to F off and that teacher is demanding that you deal with it immediately. Well, I've still got to teach my lesson. And so it is really, it's trying to find that balance.
Difficult.
Yeah.
For our audience, what help is out there from within the the parameters of the education? I know you touched on it a little bit, but is there, in the with the school that you work in, is there obviously you've mentioned some of the pastoral stuff and things you can do, but is there any additional help, maybe even for the parents as well, or?
Parents are generally, it really depends school to school, and it depends borough to borough, like local authorities, depends on the local authority. I would always suggest reaching out to the school and saying, this is what's happening, what do you have to offer, what can you offer little Johnny to help us, this is what's going on. Outside of that, especially if you've got a child with behavioural needs or additional needs, it could be they're masking something deeper. Weirdly enough, Facebook groups are really good for research, reading through comments. You don't even have to say anything yourself, but reading through other people's comments, because local additional needs groups, for example, or local behavioural groups will have links to other
support
resources.
Yeah.
And so they will be able to go, why don't you try this this group or whatever. And so it really does depend on what you want support in. And so the best place usually to find that is through your local authority or through your school or by research in your local area.
Okay. But everything that we discussed today and the relative recent, as you before mentioned, industrial action taken by many of the teaching unions. Do you think you're fairly rewarded for the job you're expected to do?
I feel that I am fairly rewarded for the job that I'm supposed to do, but the job I actually do, I don't want any more money for it, but if there was more support put into place, I wouldn't have to work 11-hour days. I wouldn't need to, deal with the amount of stress that I deal with. So it's not that I want more money. I want more money in schools, not to go to me or to teachers necessarily, but the support. So, like, for example, some misconceptions, because obviously pay is quite a tricky area when it comes to teachers, and you see it all the time on, obviously, on social media. I don't get paid for school holidays. So I get the same amount of school holiday, paid holiday as everyone else, so 4 weeks, whatever that is. I don't get paid for the rest. It just evens out. I get, they prorate it, I get the paid amount, the same amount every month. So I don't get 13 weeks paid holiday a year. That's not true. I mostly do 11-hour days. Now that's just me, but you'll speak to a lot of teachers and they will be answering emails from home, marking at weekends, planning from home. They might leave a little bit earlier than me, but then they will be working from home once their kids are in bed. So a teacher will not come in at 8 o'clock and go home at 3, 4 o'clock and that's it. That never,
They're
ever
not walking
happens.
in with the bell and going out with the bell.
Never. No, never. That never happens. The amount of marking, planning and things, a standard teacher without any responsibility does about 42 hours over 2 weeks. So they have 8 hours in a school day then, which they might get taken for cover for, because obviously there's teachers are ringing in sick or whatever, so they might not even have that time. That they have to do all of their planning, all of their marking and everything, getting back to parents and queries and questions and things like that. It's not enough time. And so they will work from home, most teachers. There isn't enough support staff. So we don't have enough one-to-ones. Our one-to-ones or LSAs, learning support assistants, they don't get paid enough money. And so because they don't get paid enough money, we don't have many of them. We're always short-staffed in terms of learning support. And the quality of learning support as well, obviously, if you don't pay enough, then you're not going to get the quality of people that you necessarily need. Now, don't get me wrong. If you get a learning support assistant in your classroom, you're doing backflips as a teacher. Like, you're like, yes, we've got someone else to help. Yeah. But it doesn't happen very often, because obviously they are there to help with the children with the EHCPs, generally like the educational healthcare plans, where legally they have to have a one-to-one.
Are they within the budget, or is that
they get additional
funding for those?
Just for those.
Yes.
Yeah.
So say if you had like 2 or 3 in a class, there could potentially be, in the ideal world, there could be 2 or 3 of those.
That doesn't happen.
No.
Because they would probably just put in one for those,
to cover those 3.
Those 3.
Right.
Because we have a vast amount of children that do not have EHCPs that need one-to-one support.
Right.
And so again, that pressure from the parents. Well, my child doesn't know how to read. He's in year 8. What are you going to do about that? So we have to put one-to-one support in to help that child, but then that comes out of our budget. That we have to pay for that. There is no extra money for that. So the HCP, if the child has an HCP, that's great, because obviously we get extra funding for that child. But that funding goes on that child. Kind of doesn't always go into a pot.
No.
So
it just it just seems an awful lot about expectations of the kid, expectations of the parents, expectations of the school, expectations of the government.
Yeah.
And it's about managing all those, which I think from what you're saying, without decent communication, is near on impossible, it seems.
Yeah, you definitely need to be a good communicator. Yeah, you definitely do need to be a good communicator to make your life easier.
Well, as I've seen with your previous life, as rather than getting lumps taken out of you, you can manage to, again, communicate to de-escalate things and all the rest of it.
Exactly, yeah. So, don't... And I feel like I've kind of sat here and gone, oh, woe is me, it's horrendous. No. But I absolutely do love my job.
It seems, I don't think it's, I personally don't think you come across like that at all. I think it's come across as someone that actually wants to do more. And if there was more funds or more help available, you kind of know the way you could make it better for a lot more people. So I think that I don't think you do come across that way at all.
Oh,
I would like to really, really thank you for coming in and for your time. I really, really appreciate it, Claire. Thank you. It's given us a real different perspective from our previous guests. Thank you, the viewers and listeners. Please do like, follow and share, and join us on the next episode of My Minefield.